Hi, this is Walter from Yellowstone Country Fly Fishing with my Montana Guide Flies fly tying video for July 5th, 2025. And I'm in the thick of guide season here, and so this is probably like all of my videos this summer going to be is kind of a I must tie this right now because I only have two left. And the reason I only have two left is because I came up with this pattern 2 nights ago. I'm recording this on the 4th, so the evening of the 2nd, and gave it its baptism of fire yesterday, well, 2 days ago when this video drops, on the Yellowstone River, and it was fantastic. We got fish on it within 5 minutes, and this was our best fly. Had a really, really rough trip on Monday on the Boulder River. Had some guys who absolutely would not nymph fish at all, with an indicator at least, and the fish were sitting 6 feet deep, so that had kind of predictable results. I actually talked to another guide who was on the river, just happened to run into him in town here, and he was catching fish on indicators 6 feet deep, and we were fishing 3 feet deep, and that didn't work. Whereas yesterday, or on the 3rd, I was on the Yellowstone River in Paradise Valley, the bird float, if you're familiar with that, the most popular recreational float on the Yellowstone River, and there were no other guides out because they were afraid of the 4th of July crowds, and it was cloudy, so we got to fish double dry fly rigs basically all day, which you almost never get to do on that stretch. In fact, I don't think I've ever done it. And so, the trout gods giveth and the trout gods taketh away. They were giving on the 3rd on this pattern. So I'm going to go ahead and tie it. This is a Triple Wing Caddis, kind of dead bug style. In other words, it's facing forward, the wing, rather than back. I also tied this with the wing facing rearward, but to be honest with you, I haven't even tried it yet because this one was the one they wanted because there were egg layers and dying caddis on the water, and I think this one is kind of your good sort of windshield caddis, so to speak. Okay, the hook in the vise here is going to be a size 14 emerger hook, and I tied some of these in 16 too, I just didn't fish them yet. My thread is going to be 6/0 in light brown, Montana Fly Company, which is no longer made anymore, but you can get the right color, on some other material. And you can certainly tie this in 8/0. I just found this thread first, and since there's not a whole lot going on here, the 6/0 is fine. I'm going to go ahead and start that about a third of the way back. And then I called this a Triple Wing Caddis. Charlie Craven originated the pattern. He calls it something else, and the term he uses for it is a character from South Park, which is mostly used as a slur against people using wheelchairs nowadays. And so I don't use that term. You can probably figure it out real quick what the Charlie Craven pattern is. And he fishes it as a mayfly. I think it's a good kind of everything bug. And certainly some tweaks. I don't have any tails on this one, for example, because it's a caddis. But anyhow, rusty brown or root beer crystal flash is in my rib. I'm going to tie that in, wrap that down the hook shank. And then I'm going to finish. I wrapped well down into the bend there, and I'm going to finish with one turn behind that. And the body on this fly is going to be Hare's Ear Arizona synthetic peacock dubbing. And synthetic peacock is actually my favorite dry caddis dubbing, even though it's probably mostly seen as a nymph dubbing. I like the peacock color on my olive caddis. I like this Hare's Ear on my tan caddis, and I also tie my caddis pupae out of this material. So it's a really good stuff, and it's distributed by Montana Fly Company now. So I'm gonna dub that on. It dubs fairly rough, and that's one reason I like it for caddis, because caddis are messy. And it's relatively short fiber dubbing, and so even though I single strand dubbed that pretty heavily, if I wind up having too much of it, no problem, I'll just take it off. Unlike a lot of long strand dubbings, this one comes off quite easily if you put too much on the thread. All right, and roughly a third of the hook shank remaining in front there. Now I'm going to take my crystal flash, and this doesn't really do anything to reinforce the fly. It just kind of provides segmentation, and it also provides a little flash in the body. And to keep that stuff from really disappearing in that dubbing, I'm actually going to counter rib this. I usually don't like counter ribbing because I'm wrapping, counter to the way the body is kind of already going. And I think that I did screw up there. I think that tends to, well, number one, it's harder to tie off like I just did. But number two, I think it actually tends to slightly loosen the body on the fly. In other words, make it a little bit more likely to get kind of scraggly and fall apart. But in this case, I think the the benefits outweigh the costs there, because you can see, you know, that flash actually shows pretty well. Whereas when I tied a couple of these, the first one, I wrapped it the other direction and it kind of disappeared into the dubbing. Alright, and then my wing is going to be a fairly thick clump of Caddis tan Montana Fly Company Widow's Web. And EP fibers are the same basic material. Bonnie craft cord's the same basic material. Charlie Craven ties these with a blend of colors, but I think on the Caddis at least, and the really small ones, you don't really need to do that. EP fibers do come in kind of blended colors. If you wanted to do that, that'd be the fastest way of doing it, rather than trying to, you know, hand blend all this. But anyway, I'm going to tie that in here, finishing roughly halfway between that end of the abdomen there and the eye. And the next step will show you why. I'm going to go ahead and split those wings, or split that forward clump, I should say, and then divide that into wings. And so kind of a spinner wing here. I'm going to take X-wraps to secure that. I think Charlie Craven just uses dubbing in front to secure it, but I think this is a more secure way, and it keeps those wings apart, particularly on a caddis where, you know, it's a dead bug caddis, you know, something that came off your windshield, but they still have, you know, spent wing. When they have spent wings, they lay out to the sides like that. Now my thorax on this fly is going to, so it should look like that at this point. So my thorax on this fly is going to be a roughly 50-50 blend of that hare's ear synthetic dubbing, the Arizona synthetic peacock dubbing, and then rusty brown ice dub. And I just hand blended this at my bench. If I was going to be tying a million of these, I'd do it in a blender, but you don't need very much, and so you can just kind of rip that, you know, do this with it, just kind of rip it up in your fingers and get the blend you want. So I'll take a pinch of that, and I'm going to kind of more roughly dub this. I like this to be a little messier. And then I'm going to take, you know, a couple turns, probably 2 turns there behind the those splayed wings, and then I'll take a couple X-wraps here, and then probably 1 wrap in front. And your mileage may vary, you know, get it to the point where you've got sort of everything covered up there, and that's all you need. And I'm going to take my rear-facing clump wing, I'm going to pull that forward, and then I'm going to pull it tight, and then pull my side wings back. But then what I'm going to do is kind of back off a little bit on this forward wing, and then tie it in like so that there's a little bit of a loop there. And a lot of your flotation is going to come from this loop, because that's going to trap floating in air. So I'll take about 3 turns in front there, and then sometimes I like to whip finish or start my whip finish on top of this, but I've got enough room in front of my eye here. I'm just going to whip finish right in front. And whip finishing in front like this, at least with a couple turns of the thread, you know, you can start it on the tie-off point for the wing if you like, but I always take a couple turns in front so that I have a clear eye for tying things off, which I've done now. It also makes it easier to tie in, you know, tie the fly on with this clump hanging over the eye. Sometimes that eye sort of disappears in the clump, and it's hard to get your tippet through. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and trim this now. I'm going to trim the front wing just in kind of a clump like this, roughly the same length as the body, maybe a little shorter. And then I'm going to take my side wings here, and I'm going to do my best to trim those evenly. And so I've turned those out like this, and then I'm going to trim these facing rearward. So I have my scissors oriented like this on the top wing, and then like this on the bottom one. And I'm doing this because I want to establish that caddis profile. So this is going to be kind of that V, but it's a V of a caddis wing that's been split and now is splayed out to the sides. On the mayfly, I actually do it the other way. I go like this to get spinner wings. And definitely, you know, take off less rather than more to start with, because you're probably going to make things uneven like I did there. You see how I left the one much longer. The fish won't care at all, but it might make the fly twirl a little bit, so I'm going to go ahead and trim again here. And I think Charlie Craven does them all at once, but I find that they look better this way for me. So that's probably good enough. Again, it's not maybe quite even, but the fish won't care. And like I said, that fly worked great for me on the 3rd on the Yellowstone River as a kind of drowned spent caddis, egg-laying caddis. And I suspect it's going to continue working. So I'm going to sit down here and tie about 15 more of those. As always, thanks for watching, and if you find this video helpful, throw me a coin by, toss a coin to your witcher by clicking the Buy Me a Coffee link. And if you're looking for guide trips, I did have 3 cancellations this month so far, so I may be in the process of rebooking one of those days already, but I do have a few extra days available this month, although I continue to book August and September pretty well. You can contact me at flyfishmontana.biz or make a comment below. I'll try to get another video out within the next week or so, but the demands of guiding kind of come first. See you next time.